Council work session for Monday, August the 5th. It's now 6:30 p.m. I think we'll get started. A couple of items on the agenda tonight, the first being the City Code. Title I and Title II of the City Code was passed out to us at the last work session. Hope you had a chance to look through that, and you've had a chance to share any concerns or questions with Mr. Fearborn prior to tonight, if there are any. But if there are some, we can bring them up tonight as well. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to kind of start with just an overarching couple of statements relative to what staff was trying to accomplish in this review of the code. It was primarily, the project got started, you'll remember, all the way back when we began the charter review, and several of the initial sections that we've already brought to you were to bring us into compliance with the changes that were associated with the charter or discrepancies that had come up before the Charter Review Committee even met. Those are already completed. The goal then became to bring the code up to date. It hadn't been updated since it was established, in essence, with the exception of the piecemeal, and bring it up to date with a more comprehensive view where we were considering one section as we were reviewing another section to try to get them to merge better than it had been. And another primary goal was to make it simpler to read and to interpret especially. In looking at the code, our translation of what was existing was always, there's either literal translation or dynamic translation. And dynamic translation is defined as functional translation. So we tried to use, wherever possible, dynamic translation of the code so that it would be understandable not only to ourselves but to a citizen who might be out there trying to interpret the code. We did eliminate a whole lot of highfalutin attorney words. Anywhere where we saw heretofore or thereof, all that big city lawyer stuff, we removed those and tried to keep it simpler. By that, I think we lost about 200 pages doing that. We also removed any reference. The code was completely filled with his, her, his, her, his, her. There's a word for that called there. So those sorts of changes that were just real simple, we put them in for ease of understanding. For definitions that applied to the entirety of the code, and there were a few of them, we moved those definitions to section 1, where again those are overarching definitions within the code so that they would apply everywhere. The only definitions that then exist, for instance, at the beginning of Title II, are definitions that are associated with that section and that section alone. To that end, if we could, so those are the, again, the kind of the high-level indications within the code. If we could just bring up some points relative to Title I, and then we'd be more than happy to receive any input that the council might have. Three things that I wanted to bring up relative to it. Section 105030, line 282, is a significant change that impacts the mayor and the city council, and specifically what is in there is that if more than one candidate files for a particular office, the candidates are then placed on the ballot according to a lottery drawing rather than the first one who comes through the door. There have been, Jeannie was really concerned about this. I actually experienced it several times when I was with the school district where people were fighting on who was the first at the door, and they were getting up here at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were having to call Kansas City, Missouri Police Department to come out and separate candidates because they were both claiming that they touched the front door first. So she's recommending the lottery system to avoid that particular sort of incident occurring. The section 130-130, the Violations Bureau, page 38 of Title I, and I'm going to have Mr. Zur speak to this particular one. This is in the court section. Mr. Zur.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. The section that you're dealing with here, actually, I just handed it to you, my page. If I might be able to get that page back from you, sir. Thank you. The section that you're dealing with here references with the Traffic Violations Bureau. We had the opportunity to work with Prosecutor Bill Marshall as well as Judge Nigro in reviewing a number of these sections, including the Violations Bureau. And basically, once the municipal court was established by the city of Raymore, the judge in essence created the Violations Bureau. What you will find under a number of these sections are drawn directly from statute or will make reference to statute and have been based upon the conversations that we had with Judge Nigro as well as the court clerk and Bill Marshall throughout the course of the review. I would identify them as making sure that we are in compliant with state statute with regard to how we operate and removing the potential establishment of the Violations Bureau with actually having a Violations Bureau.
So it drilled down quite a bit more in detail, and I think there were 3 sections added within there. Now that it is actually up and running, that are guidelines for what's actually occurring in there. Again, the Violations Bureau, as Mr. Zur indicated, the Violations Bureau began the second we established a municipal court. It's always been here, so. One of the other items, just as a practical matter, because I noticed some confusion over here, your packet tonight includes some changes that we're going to be making recommendations to, and then for a month from now, we handed out sections 300 and 500 for your review prior to probably the second meeting in September. Now, where was I on my list here? Here we go. The last significant change in Title I is the last section of Title I included Section 150, and all of Section 150 was it was just pulled out of the Sunshine Law, and it was how the Sunshine Law impacts the City Council. Earlier in Title I, any elected official or appointed official of the city, which is in essence everybody, has to abide by 610, the Sunshine Law. So that's in there as one line, much more simple. And again, you'd have to go reference it all. There's no reason to repeat the entirety of the Sunshine Law in Section 150. And you'll see that a lot as you go through, especially Section 3, because every single time a statute has to change, we have to go back in and change our code. So we tried wherever we could in here to simply say, section still exists with our title, but will be in compliance with all elements of statute as amended. That's the input from Title I that we had for you all this evening. Would you have any feedback relative to you all's review?
Thank you. I just had a question. You were talking about the change in filing for candidacy and going to the lottery draw as opposed to those who showed up and then turned their paperwork in first. So is that a lottery draw each day, or is it for the entirety of the election filing process?
It's proposed for the entirety of the election process.
Okay, so there will be the functional change will be we won't have people knock on the doors if they understand that, and we'll be knocking the doors down at 8 o'clock on the first day of filing.
Exactly, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a general question, and it's probably understood with regard to vacancies. When I look at the existing and the change here, it's no change to it, but I was just curious when I was reading through it.
For our reference, could you refer to the page and title number and all that?
Yes, I'm referring to both the mayor's vacancy, which I don't believe there's a page 14, there's just the last page of the Article 1 of Chapter 110. Whereas in the council section, there is a section speaking to the vacancy and the procedure for vacancy of a council member and the order of succession with regard to the mayor pro tem. If the mayor is otherwise disposed or according to the charter, vacates the seat as Article, Article 4 of the charter speaks to reasons for vacancies. Mm-hmm. What happens if by alignment of the stars, both the mayor's position and the mayor pro temp is vacated for the reasons identified in our charter and our code, particularly for the mayor's position, how does that position get filled?
The council elects a presiding officer.
Where did I miss that?
It is not in here, but that has been the procedure that has been followed.
Okay.
We actually had, it wasn't due to a vacancy, but we had a situation where both the mayor and the mayor pro tem were gone last year. And we presented that particular procedure to the council and you all approved it. And I believe Councilmember Holman was elected presiding
I
officer.
remembered that, okay. I was just curious, I was expecting to see something delineated within either the charter or the ordinance that spoke to in the absence of both, for whatever reason. So in that instance, if the mayor is vacated for a significant period, i.e. having to have a reelection, how long would the mayor pro temp serve, or would those proceedings be in place? Because as far as a council member, the council's application, and we kind of appoint until the next term. Is it similar for?
The mayor pro tem, I believe, in 110-220, as long as there is a physical absence for whatever reason of the mayor, whether it's a total vacancy or he's incapacitated, that calls for the mayor pro tem to serve for as long as that period is until
The election.
such vacancy is filled or such disability is removed.
So it could be, if not trying to get rid of you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just asking the questions.
I just
I'm just asking the
asked
questions.
Mr. Holman if you'd been talking to my doctor or something.
I know nothing. I know nothing. I was just curious.
I haven't heard anything lately.
Yeah, there we go. So it could theoretically, in the beginning of a 3-year term, shortly at the beginning of that, the mayor pro temp could serve mayor pro temp and council member for the term until the next election?
Actually, it would be, yeah, it would be until the next, not the 3-year election, the next municipal election.
Okay, the next municipal election, not the term of the mayor, but the
That's
next
correct.
municipal election. Okay, thank you.
And actually, I think we did that, didn't we? 2 previous mayors. The one mayor resigned, and then we had a council member who was mayor pro tem, stepped in and filled that slot until the election.
That's correct.
And was elected mayor, yeah. That was the procedure then previously.
Okay, thank you.
Would the council see a value in outlining within code what has been the procedure for if both are gone for whatever reason? Again, we would use the physical absence language for whatever the reason, that from among the rest of the membership, a presiding officer would be elected to fill that temporarily.
That would pose a question because we articulate it for the council, but we don't say it for the mayor.
Well, I actually think it would be a completely separate section for the unusual circumstance of both of them
Both.
being gone.
I see, okay,
Yeah.
I see.
Would there be value in that? Would you like to see that?
Probably help Alexander Haig.
Perfect. We'll give you some proposed language to look at on the next round. Of course, we won't be passing these section by section because they're so intertwined that it'll all be passed at once we hack through all of them.
Okay.
Perfect. Anything else on Title I? We get to Title II. A couple of items that we want to bring up relative to Title II, and I have them highlighted for myself here. And they are Section 210-330, page 26. And on page 27, B11. And then that repeats itself again in section 210-333 and 210-337. Specifically, several years ago, a couple of years ago now, we had an issue in Ward Park with the discharge of a weapon within the city limits but it was legal because it was discharged from an agricultural property. If the council wants to do anything with a change to this, we leave this open for your discussion or consideration tonight. If you would like to see staff come back with something, or if you're satisfied with the code as it currently exists. Short form, if you wanted to make a change, this would be the time to do that.
Anyone have any issues with that particular section? I mean, it's kind of the way we follow things now, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
there's not much of a change. It's just that you've inserted a few pieces of verbiage that have clarified it a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah, but no substantive change to do anything like a complete ban or
Right.
anything like that. Same distances away. It's actually come informally to the council members from Ward 3 as well, but the distance in here made it illegal to discharge a firearm because it was too close to buildings itself.
Okay.
Very good. We will take that as no change. And now, Mr. Catarat, if you'd care to step up to the table. I'll just turn it over to you for introduction.
If you could turn to section 205, 230. A few months back, when council was considering the 30th Amendment to the Unified Development Code, you actually rejected that amendment. That was the amendment dealing with the keeping of fowl. So at that time, council determined that fowl, similar animals, will only be allowed in agricultural and rural estate properties. But we identified to council, with that decision, we needed to make clarification in the Animal Control Code section. So that 205, 230 language change that we're proposing is where it would read, with the exception of areas zoned agriculture or rural estate, the following animals are specifically prohibited, and that's where we're identifying chickens, turkeys, ducks, sheep, goats, similar animals. We're making that clarification to be clear in our Animal Control Code of the prohibition of those animals anywhere except agricultural and rural estate. So we're simply following up with what we told council we'd do at that time.
Okay. Anything else, Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Catarat. And the last section that we would like to call out, just to see if the council wants to see any changes, Chapter 215, 215, all of Chapter 215, as a matter of fact, pick a section of it that you'd like to talk about. Just passed through the 4th of July, and this is the fireworks section. The mayor has received several communications for people who want everything from an outright ban to only allowing a one-day shoot. There are significant logistical issues associated with bans on fireworks or trimming back the hours and the days that we allow it, primarily because everybody around us allows it. And so if we ban the sale of them, all you got to do is drive out to 291 and 58 Highway, and you can buy as much as you want, I believe 7 days in advance. It is a logistical nightmare.
Not to mention an enforcement nightmare.
Exactly.
And I think that's where the previous councils went, because I was on the police department at the time the fireworks ordinance was modified to a certain extent with regard to the hours of sale and the hours of use, the number of days prior. Most of the complaints that I've received have been, and I've got a couple of them in writing if you'd like to see them, several of them in email, had to deal with the expansion, the personal expansion of the use of fireworks, not only outside the times of the day, but outside the dates range. Many talking about a 2-week use rather than the 4-day use as is allowed by law. I did, on one occasion, they were so emphatic about it, I did promise them that I would bring it up for discussion at our work session, which we're doing right now, to see if there's any flavor for potentially restricting its use. I wouldn't say an outright ban. I don't think that would go over well, but potentially restricting it for the use of days and the times used. And as I said, it's an enforcement nightmare. It's very difficult for the police. We rarely got into an area in time to see the actual perpetrator that could be cited for the violation of the law. And so it's a hard one. And sometimes even discussing with them that, while Kansas City has an outright ban, in certain sections of Kansas City, it's worse than what you might see here in Raymore. But it's hard to take when you're talking to people who have family members who, especially now that we've got so many veterans who've returned home since 2003, who have been in the field and experienced PTSD. And we've had, people with animals, the complaining, once they feel like it's safe to go back outside, then boom, something goes off. And it just puts them right back into a terror mode. So I see their complaints. I feel their pain. I had a yellow lab that did the same thing, just cowered for the entire period. And it was, he was never a good gun dog, let me tell you that. So we never went hunting. But he was a good swimmer. But anyway, he was, I lost him at 11 years. And I wonder if over all those years, is that those 2 weeks of, wore on him, because he was, and I get that, I understand that. So I just thought I'd asked Mr. Fearborn if we could bring this up as just a discussion item as we were going through Title II here, to see if there was any other people here that had received complaints or suggestions for further restriction on the use of fireworks. I don't think we have any. Mr. Berenson? Okay.
I was going to say, I received one complaint last year, but I thought it was a bit unreasonable in its nature anyway. And I tend to agree with you. I think that if we restrict this further, we're just going to create a bigger burden on our police department. So I would support keeping it the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Delloy.
Probably every year I've been on the council, I've had at least one person with a concern about the fireworks. Generally, it is requesting it to be a shorter amount of time or an all-out ban
Right.
of fireworks in the city. But like I said, it's usually one or two people. Probably the thing that I've heard most often lately in the last 2 years is that if the city can shoot fireworks outside of that time frame, then we should also allow citizens to be able to do that. So based on that, just adding in maybe to the wording also on the day that the city has their fireworks show, so then people can shoot that evening as well as the city show. That would really be the only thing that I think is worth a consideration at this point. Not to say that I don't value people's feelings or, how traumatic it can be for people, but there's so many more people who celebrate and enjoy it. I think that it would be hard to really ban it. I don't think people would follow it. Like you said, the enforcement would definitely be an issue. I
do see the one argument where the lady that lives here in Ward 2, right here on Johnson Drive, complained that of the time frame, that we allow it for 4 days when really Independence Day gives no connotation to Independence Days, and that we would restrict it to Independence Day. Now, I think it's a little unfair of people to liken it to our show that we put on for 20 minutes, 1 day a year. That is, that happens throughout the metro area, even in the city of Kansas City, where it's banned. Those shows occur at the city level. So I don't know that you can liken that. It's a little bit apples to oranges thing there, but I don't know. I don't have a say in it because I don't have a vote. I'd like to see it maybe restricted a little bit more, but and then again, we do put the burden back on the police department, and it is very difficult. And the chief, who also experienced the problems in Kansas City, I don't know, is Jan here? Do you have an opinion about that, Chief, with regard to?
As you said, Mr. Mayor.
Could you step up to the mic over there? Sorry.
She's got the same knee I got.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
I had PT this afternoon. It never made any difference whatsoever in Kansas City. In my neighborhood up north, all the places that I patrol in Kansas City, it was like a war zone. And it's always been illegal in Kansas City. And so it never kept people from shooting them off. It's exactly as you said, that we're lucky if we can get someplace, when we get a complaint from a citizen saying they're shooting them on my block, we usually make it there in time to see the debris. But, as far as getting, and we always look for voluntary compliance. So, if people will stop, but, with the code, the way that it's currently written, we're just asking people not to shoot them in the middle of the street, don't block traffic, and people will comply. And so it never made any difference in Kansas City at all.
Okay. Thank you. I don't see a flavor for any change. Mr. Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I see you got the 3 to 4 days. You put the tents up, they got 1 week, 7 days to sell. And all of the tents are 501(c) charity groups, churches making some money at one time to go into their church and their activities and their camps. So I think if you limit too much of the time they shoot them all, people will be reluctant to buy them sooner. Another 7 days, and they would hold sales. I think it might hurt the businesses or the churches who are trying to run the tents to make some profit. So I think the 3 days and then the 4th is right now is fine. I lived in South Kansas City for 22 years, and we shoot them off, and even though it wasn't against the city, and then some of the officers would come by and say, just be very careful and compliant, just be careful, and we would shoot them off. But I think keeping the short time we have now, the 4 days and only the 7 days of the tents for sales within the city limits, really kind of crunches that down now as it is. How much time you allow them to shoot them off, how much time that people would want to even spend money or buy them. So that's just something to think about.
Okay. Mr. Barber?
Thank you. Yeah, the chief is, her comments are well received. I believe, though, our citizens, most of our citizens, want to do the right thing and stay within the law. Maybe a strategy would be do a blitz as far as communication to them, what's legal, what the legal times are, really hit them pretty hard. I can tell you that it amazes me with everything that we do, even with like our trash pickup and our recycle, the folks that don't get that information. So maybe kind of scratch our heads a little bit and think about how we could communicate, these are the time frames, and the reason we do this is because of pets and people that have, issues with that, and maybe even a little blurb in there that this is reconsidered every year with the council, and you don't want to threaten, but if things get worse, if people start, we had a 4th this year where it rained during the 4th, and I know a lot of folks the day after, which is totally illegal, fired their fireworks off. And so I know that was frustrating for the people that said, finally it's going to end. And then on the 5th, people were shooting their fireworks off. So I'm just kind of throwing that out. I know we do a good job, but is there something that we could do to kind of drive home? Maybe do, and I haven't bought fireworks in here, but with the fireworks tents in the city limits of Raymore, do they pass anything out about the ordinance? Do they have anything posted? They do, okay. All right, so there's probably no excuse, but doesn't mean somebody doesn't read the piece of paper or look at the sign, so.
Thank you. Mr. Burke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was at First Friday last Friday, and one of the things that I thought the city did that was good was they had just photocopied pieces of paper saying no alcohol on the streets and the sidewalks. And because we were pretty sure it was illegal, but we knew for sure when we saw that, and knew that you needed to stay in the area where it was legal and where it wasn't. And it seemed like it was easy for us to understand, just because it was posted up. And I know we don't want to have little pieces of paper stapled to poles everywhere, but at least it was easy for police to say, well, do you see that sign? It's right there. Can you just go ahead and you know, and they would take care of it, and it was fine. And I was oblivious to what happened later. Apparently I'd walked through there about 20 minutes before, but I felt very safe and had a good time, and I felt like most people were interacting in a good way in a public setting like we would have on a 4th of July. And sometimes just little signs help a lot.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thanks, Chief. I don't think there's anything else on that particular topic. Is there anything else you wanted to highlight?
Just wanted to go back to the query from Councilmember Holman relative to the lottery. Jeannie wrote me from wherever in the United States she happens to be right now watching this particular movie. Hi, Jeannie. The wording actually does say for persons on the first day, but Jonathan, legal has concerns, as he always says in management team. Legal has concerns with that particular item because it could lead to a challenge. Hey, now wait a minute. Everybody on the first day, but I filed, 1 hour after the guy when I could, but I filed on Wednesday morning or even later. You get into that time frame deal. So Mr. Zur would actually recommend that it be for the entire period, and everything is thrown into a lottery.
That's fine.
So we'll make that change to the wording.
Okay.
And that concludes staff report on this item, sir.
Okay. Any other questions about Titles 1 and 2 as presented? Looks like we can move forward with that for codification.
Thank you, sir.
And next item is the water and sewer rates. Oh, my. Mr. Fearborn?
I have to get my glasses on, sir. It's a very small graph. Each year, we have to bring these to you because each year we operate, as the council knows, on a cost of service method, meaning that the only revenues we need to garner, or that we attempt to garner, are what we need relative to beginning fund balance. It's actually behind your agenda, sir, stapled to your agenda. For some of the assumptions that we used for this particular year's setting of the rates, operating and maintenance expense projected changes, we have plugged in a 4% increase just as we did last year for personnel and benefits. Commodities, we're anticipating being down 5%. Maintenance and supplies, 5%. Utilities, down 1%. Contractual, the primary increase in contractual is associated with a 17% increase, a 17% increase in the Little Blue Valley sewer rate that went into effect this year, but it will impact next year. The Kansas City Water has actually let us know that there will be no increase this year for next year, but we're assuming a 14% due to consumption increase. Middle Big Creek, there is no rate increase, but it does plug in we pay by connection at Middle Big Creek, whereas we pay by volume with Little Blue Valley Sewer District. It also assumes just some questions on here that, as you can see, the spread of volume versus non-volume customers, we count that for you all each year. We have 4,169 on volume, 3,459 on winter average. Some days that tips and goes the other direction, and it's not as painful. We would like to get everybody on winter averaging that we possibly can. The problem right now is folks that are either snowbirds or have that incredibly low volume of water, which is becoming more and more rare. It's still it would be a hardship on them to have to go to the winter averaging, and they would be paying more. The price increase for Little Blue begins on October 2019. Already talked about the Kansas City water consumption increase. We currently pay Middle Big Creek $32.50 per connection. That doesn't go up until 2021, and that is based on Middle Big Creek having to make bond payments against the huge facility increase that they did over in Pleasant Hill several years ago. And then, of course, the new debt from the infrastructure funding that we had. This maintains the 3R or into the enterprise maintenance fund, Fund 54, maintaining the contribution into there of $600,000 out of this fund to pay for infrastructure improvements. Based on all of those, turn to the teeny tiny graph. Staff is recommending that water rates be decreased from $6.55 to $6.38 per 1,000 gallons, that sewer be increased from $7.91 to $88.35. This represents on a monthly bill, the monthly bill going up $14.74 or 1.91%. The combined rate would be $14.74, up from 14.46 cents per 1,000 gallons, or a 1.91% increase. As you can see, we were running pretty high a couple of years ago. 2 years ago, we managed to hold the rates, the combined rate the same. Last year, the combined rate actually decreased by 0.34%. And interestingly enough, I had an email from Councilmember Jacobson today from a customer who lives in the city but is a customer within the Water District 10, asking that the city council do something with Water District 10 so that his rate could go down, and he had some comparisons that were pretty startling. Each year when we do this, we like to show you what this would mean in the urban legend of Raymore being the highest in the area as far as our water and sewer combined bill is. As the combined rate of 7807 based on 5,300 gallons, that'd be the normal, that's our average, is 5,300. So one of our citizens, if the new rates are implemented by the council, would be paying $78.07. You can see how that puts us on the chart. In essence, only Lee Summit is lower at $77.72. Lee Summit is a second pump of Kansas City Water. We are a third pump of Kansas City Water, and that's where you see a lot of that being impacted. Everybody else, it goes all the way up to 176.01.
Mr. Burke?
Question, does the, thank you, Mr. Mayor, by the way. Does the distance from Kansas City have anything to do with the rates? I would think it would, because it would.
Yeah, as I was just saying, Lee Summit is what they call a second pump. They only have to pump twice to get there. And then the third pump is actually located in Lee Summit on Ward Road.
So each time you get to a pump,
off to the east
it's
there, and then
gonna
they're
cost
pumping
more.
down to us, so we're a third pump, and yeah, each one of those, it goes up pretty considerable, as a matter of fact. A lot of times, the folks who are the most bitter complainers, just anecdotally, we find out that they have actually moved from a location in Kansas City where a lot of this is subsidized out to here, and it is sticker shock when you come out here from there, for sure. The sewer rate is by code and state statute required to come to a public hearing before the council. We would propose that that public hearing take place next week, and of course, as you all will remember, we always combine, we go ahead and have a public hearing on the water as well, just because we're here and people think of it together. in any event. That concludes staff report on this item, sir.
Thanks, Jim. Any questions? Mr. Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Furborn, for addressing the concern with the water district. That I also received the email, and Mr. Jacobson already provided the information. So when did the relationship with the public water district change to the residents?
And I apologize, I didn't notice that you were on that email, or I would have courtesy copied you on what came back. You all have kind of heard this story before, because you lived the water district 10 nightmare along with staff every single week. But as cities expand, and this happens everywhere in the United States, as cities expand into suburban and rural areas, necessarily the city limits are drawn, but we have to honor what has already been put in place by the circuit court of the counties. In this case, we expanded our city limits to the south, and this particular gentleman lives to the south. And when we did that, we expanded into the water district. We do not have an agreement like we did in Stonegate South, so the water district has every right, and in fact they are encumbered by law, and we are encumbered to stay out of their business for those persons who live in the water district but reside within the city limits. I think this person just didn't quite understand that dynamic. So I wrote Councilmember Jacobson back and explained what had happened to allow us to win at the federal level relative to the water district. And even that didn't stop him from appealing, but fortunately, in a very amicable way, we have been able to settle all of those disputes and are moving forward. But the only reason that we prevailed is because at a jury trial, we were able to convince the jury of two things. Rural water districts are incapable of providing fire flow protection for either residents, schools, or businesses. And I think there was a degree to which, because it did come out in trial even though it wasn't supposed to, there was a degree to which the jury understood that for those areas in Stonegate, unlike these areas, yes, we did encroach, but we encroached after an agreement was reached. Two agreements were reached and signed. It's just the technicality of the fact that those agreements were never turned into the Missouri Public Service Commission. You may remember all of that. There is a way, but we have to go into that area and work with the circuit court to tell the circuit court we can provide this better. And of course, as you all know, staff has something of a long-term plan associated with that in some of our areas.
Follow-up question to that then. Is the annexation team consulting firm considering those aspects of water districts as they're deliberating?
They know that the costs that will be associated with the water districts, we would, as a component of that, we would be outlining when we went into one of those areas, who the resident would have to be using, but it becomes a non-factor because residents in those areas are already using that water district as far as when it comes to the vote. Now, new development in those areas, that's where it's key to get for the developer to get the communication out. You need to be aware, even though you're in the city limits of Raymore, you're not using their water service. Here's where your water service is. And we get calls like that all the time where people are confused about it. We had a call from a woman complaining to us, she was voicing a concern about her service to us, and she actually lived under the water tower. She was in, oh gosh, what's it called? No, Mullendike. And so she's in the shadow of the water tower that has the water district's number on it, but she was calling us thinking that we were the one providing service because her post office was Raymore.
I see. Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Holden. Oh, okay.
And Mr. Zer brings up the fact that it's not just a question of price, it's a question of being able to serve the area that is there. And in Stonegate, that was another factor, that they were still 1,500 feet away from any sort of a pipe that could actually serve that area. That was another thing that the jury had to consider.
Mr. Holm?
Thank you, sir. I had a question, Mr. Fearborn, if you can answer it. It doesn't deal with us specifically, but the comparison chart that you gave us obviously is good news, like it was last year. We're the second lowest on the chart, and we're real close to Lee Summit. And we talked about, the distance from the river, like Joe mentioned, and that kind of thing. Do the other cities on this, especially, the ones that don't make a lot of sense, like Grandview and Belton, do they not charge a cost of service? Why are their rates so much higher?
There are a variety of reasons associated with that. Some of them actually refer to the revenue that they are receiving from their water and sewer rates as profit. Water District also did that as well. If you're referring to your rates that way, you're not operating on a pure cost of service model. A lot of them their rates are nearly always higher than ours. They have, in Grandview's case, significant infrastructure improvement because that's an older city, so they're having to make sure that as a component of their cost of service, they're having to put a whole lot into their 3R fund compared to where we're at as far as one of the costs of services are concerned, because they're changing out pipe almost at the rate that Kansas City, Missouri is.
Thank you. And the reason I ask that is more than mere curiosity. From time to time, people will mention this, and I'll explain to them, well, think facts mixed up and point to this. And that's always the follow-up question. And I can tell you, I can't speak as to why another city would charge what they do, but I have some theories, and that's the top two were in the top two. Thank you.
I'm sorry, sir. No one's being greedy, but everybody has different aspects that they have to prioritize within there. Some of these places have much larger staffs than we do, which obviously personnel costs are significant when it comes to that. We like to think that we operate efficiently. Our time will come too as well.
Makes
I'm
sense.
sure.
Thank you. Mr. Park?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, back to the issue where we're talking to some customers that were getting maybe a bill for trash and then thinking they were also getting their water from us. I would imagine there are customers that pay way more for the sewer usage, but are getting their water from a water district. Is that also a part that confuses people?
Anyone who's in a water district.
Okay.
Yeah, because our development, development follows being able to provide sewer. That's when you get your larger developments. If you can't provide sewer, nobody's going to build there. So nearly every place that you see, very few people would be on a water district water, live in the city limits, and be on a septic system. You could probably count them on one hand, two hands. Yeah, it's very, very rare.
And to that point, just to remind everyone, because you've stated this before, that is a reason for the logical plan of annexation to the east, because that is an area that our city can provide sewer to, and no one else has that ability at this time. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you don't want to? Okay. If there's nothing else, anybody else have anything?
So if the staff is okay with this, we will be bringing it to you for first reading and public hearing next week.
Okay. And with that, we always have other. So I've been told there is something under other that we'd like to bring up tonight. So Mr. Fearborn?
Well, actually, sir, we wouldn't like to bring it up, but I felt that Mr. Ike should probably give you an update on CARTS.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, sir. The most recent change that we have seen, so this past week, To back up to kind of give you a full context, about 2 weeks ago on the 22nd was the first day that we had a contractor who'd been hired by Jim's Disposal picking up carts in the city of Raymore. They were contracted to pick up roughly 500 carts a day. They worked through Monday through Friday, and then after that Friday, after the week of the 22nd, they left the city. There was an entire week where we were trying to contact both Jim's Disposal and the vendor, the contractor they had hired, without any success, until about midweek when we were able to contact Jim's Disposal. They seemed surprised that no one had been in the city the entire week. When we spoke with the vendor said that they were no longer doing work, and that they were having some communication issues of their own with Jim's Disposal. With that, we began to initiate our backup plan. We had toter crews on standby. There was one crew already in town that was cleaning up behind the Jim's Disposal contractor for some of those carts that still had trash or recycling in them. They were picking those up, disposing of the trash, and then placing the carts at the parking lot at the skate park and recreation park. Once we received information that the vendor was no longer picking up carts in the city, we called Toter back and said, would you be able to have more crews in town? They were able to send us 3 additional crews starting on Saturday. And so residents probably saw a significant uptick in the number of carts being removed on Saturday. Toter was back in town today with a full complement of crews, focusing primarily on the east side of town along 58 Highway, so getting everything from Sunrise, Skyview, Crest area up until about Original Town, and then also focusing on the area south of Lucy Webb, so they were clearing the Brookside neighborhood and some of the neighborhoods adjacent to that. They will continue to work pretty much sun up to sundown, removing carts from the curb that are there, and we are asking residents to leave those carts at the curb, leave them empty. Based on their workload of being able to remove 1,500 carts a day, we anticipate that with the previously removed 6,000 carts, and weather is completely a factor here, but our goal is to have all of the carts removed by this weekend. That again, weather dependent, and as long as all of the crews stay up and running for the full time that we have them here in town. At that time, we have been in contact with Jim's Disposal to let them know that all of the carts are being gathered at the parking lot in the skate park and that they are there for them to collect at their convenience.
Mike, I know that there were at least one neighborhood, if not 2, that someone had seen the carts being delivered down by the skate park at Rec Park, put a note out that if you don't want your cart, you can take it down there and drop it off. I know we tried to discourage that. Some of that probably did occur, but how were we able to put the kibosh on that and tell folks to wait?
We would encourage residents not to.
Were you able to get a hold of the folks that were communicating that?
Yes. And anyone that contacts us asking if they themselves can personally take carts, what we're telling them is we do not recommend that for a number of reasons. One being that because these are used solid waste containers, there are certain risks. 2, because most folks, even though they have a pickup truck, may not be fully equipped to transport carts or have them safely secured, and so it becomes a safety risk. And 3, we still have not received any communication from Jim's Disposal as to whether or not they are attempting to match these carts up to specific addresses. Again, that goes back to the lack of communication from Jim's Disposal that we really are trying to encourage our residents to keep them at the curb. We have a crew that specializes in this that will be picking up those carts and will be through their neighborhood very shortly.
Will we be able to provide Jim's Disposal, if they request the information, will we be able to provide the serial number of the can and the address from which it came?
That is something that Toter is working on for us.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Bergen?
Thank you. Have we given them a timeline in which to pick up these cans?
Thank you for the segue. Mr. Zur has been instructed that if they are down there if they are down there 14 days after they're delivered and they have made no attempt to contact us on how they're going to pick it up, we're not gonna keep calling them going, give us a plan, give us a plan, give us a plan. That question is going nowhere. We can't get past their attorney. Their attorney didn't even know all this was going on. We can't get past their attorney group. We have absolutely no idea where Chuck Bird is. So I think at the 14-day mark, we take the steps to, at the court level, have them declared abandoned, and then the plan will be to have one of two things occur, depending on the patient's level and time running out before we need the space at the park. First, we may put them up, and Mr. Zur is checking on this, if we can do this. If they are abandoned, can we go ahead and put them up for auction? For somebody to come in here, they still have a value, as I had discussed in executive session with the council. If we cannot put them up for auction, we would hire a constable to come in here and crush them for us. Is that accurate, Mr. Zur?
According to my instructions. Legalities of it may alter how we do that, and
Right.
probably worthy of an executive discussion at a later time.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Patrolman?
I was just curious if there was any benefit from the very clever citizens who put the face on theirs and the sign that said, "Jim, hey dude, please come pick me up."
It was already too late to, because so many people had been picked up, it was too late to start a contest. So it would have been, we could deliver them back out to them.
Anyone else? Mr. Circo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say thank you. You guys have done a great job. You got toters out there. They started Brookside. They went Evanbrook. They're Cannon Ridge. They are just moving very expediently. They are moving. I'm telling the people on the rants, hey, patience. These guys are picking them up, and they've gone through that whole south side. I know they're working around, so I'm hoping it might be even before the weekend, because as fast as these people are moving with their trucks, I watched them come down Sunset, and they were doing a very good job, very expediently, get them in, and they were just moving. So they covered a big territory today on the south side. So very impressive. We've been telling the people, telling them to calm down. You know, they're moving now. We'll have them out here in a few days, and we're going to go back to normal. And Constable's doing a great job. They have done 120%. They're picking up trash. They've been working hard. I talked to some of their drivers. They are very compliant. They're doing everything, very friendly, and they just want to work really well. And I have told people on the set out on the Raymore, please take your cans when it's your day, face them to the street, not sideways. Give it 6 inches between them if you want to put them together, if you have a blue lid. But always face them to the street, not sideways, because it's hard for them to do that. They got to get out, rearrange them. But I've been pushing that too, for people just to always face the street with them. It's very helpful, and it gets these drivers in and out a lot quicker.
Mr. Barber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've seen some stuff out. People have kind of made some comments. This hasn't really, other than a couple of years of your life, Jim, this hasn't cost the city any money at this point, and it won't on any of the action that we have to take. Am I correct in that statement?
You are absolutely correct, sir, and don't mind me. Actually, if I could make a comment here, I have had to several times in the last week confront people at the utilities window who were using the worst language and being so threatening to these two ladies at this window, and they have been absolutely wonderful. Rachel on the phone has been absolutely wonderful. They've been polite. They haven't cut anybody off. They've kind of been the punching bags in all of this. So I just want to make that a public statement.
Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Abdul.
I have another other, if
Okay.
we're finished with that. I was just curious, since school's starting next week, what's the end of our summer 6:30 work sessions? When will that stop? Or is that the plan to keep going?
Well, it's up to the council. If it's working for you, we can certainly keep it going.
Will it interfere with anybody?
we'll do whatever the council's pleasure is, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You got football season, you're ready to start. Yes, Mr. Holman.
My suggestion, I'm okay with it right now as is, but I'd kind of take a lead from Sonia. If it's going to cause an issue, let's check it out and see. And if you're going to have an issue, let's move it to 7 or see if we can get a consensus on that. Is that fair enough?
That's fine, and I'll do whatever, most people want. I prefer the 7 o'clock time. We tried the 6:30. It's just really, really difficult for me to get home, have dinner with my family, and then get my husband back to work and make it up here by 6:30. So I prefer 7, but if I'm the only one, then I can make it work.
Thank you for the clarification, because I thought you said you vote no to not change it, and that's why I was confused. So thank you.
What's the consensus? Mr. Holman, you have anything? 7 o'clock? You guys want to go back to 7 o'clock, the start of the school year?
I'm either way. It doesn't matter to me.
Doesn't it? Yeah, it works. So I think consensus is to go to 7?
I mean, I like the 6:30 in the summertime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should keep on running 6:30. Then if it does have a big conflict with the scheduling, then we can always look back to changing it. Right now, leave it at 6:30 and change it if it has a conflict with the teachers. I mean, once they get into school, I don't know what your time frames are, but
Well, she's running a foundation now, it's not teaching.
It sounds like the vast majority of us don't care. It's important to her to do 7. I'd say let's move to 7.
Okay.
We'll make it so, sir.
All right.
I do have a question about one other.
Okay.
I know the weather forecast is starting to look dire, but I believe, Mr. Icky, we were planning ribbon cutting, grand opening on Thursday this week at Hawk Ridge. Is that correct?
That date has been changed as we were, looking both at the weather, but also some of the final punch list items at Oak Ridge, yes.
Fair enough. I just didn't want to miss it.
Has there a future date been planned, or we're just kind of in the to be determined?
We do, and allow me to check with Melissa Harmer the exact dates and details, and I can get that back to everyone first thing.
All right.
I completed the final punch list last week, and it was kind of interesting. Immediately after I completed it, Mr. Icky and I were leaving. We ended up having to call 911 because somebody decided to drive the trail around it. And when I say drive it, they were driving it.
Like it was a racetrack.
Like it was a racetrack. They were doing 30, 35, yeah. We designed it to withstand it, just not like that. I would have hated been out there coming at that thing because she was moving.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Icky does have the date and time.
So coming in the clutch is Ms. Harmer, August 22nd at 4 p.m.
Okay.
And we will be gathering at the North Shelter for that ribbon cutting.
Yes.
Mr. Circo, do you have something else?
just to clarify, then on the 19th, our next work session, 2 weeks, will be 7 at that time?
That's correct.
I'll take care of you. Anything else? Any others? If there are none, we're adjourned. Thank you.